Welcome to Wine, Food and Travel with me, Marc Millon, on Italian Wine Podcast. Listen in as we journey to some of Italy's most beautiful places in the company of those who know them best, the families who grow grapes and make fabulous wines. Through their stories, we will learn not just about their wines, but also about their ways of life, the local and regional foods and specialities that pair naturally with their wines, and the most beautiful places to visit. We have a wonderful journey of discovery ahead of us, and I hope you will join me. Welcome to Wine, Food and Travel with me, Marc Millon, on Italian Wine Podcast. This morning, I'm traveling over the Brenner Pass to descend into the autonomous region of Trentino Alto Adige, or Trentino Sud Tirol as it is also known, to visit one of Italy's most historic wine estates and one of the oldest active wine estates in the world, Kloster Neustift, or in this trilingual region, Abbazia di Novacella. My guest this morning is Werner Waldboth, who is the head of sales and marketing at Neustift. Guten Tag, buongiorno, good morning, Werner. Thank you so much for being our guest. I know it's a busy moment of the year in the wine country, so we really appreciate you joining us. How are you today?
Hi, good morning. I'm fine. Thanks a lot. So actually here in our area, at the moment, it isn't that busy yet because we didn't start with the harvest. We probably start next week. So we arrive a couple of days from the real intense time of year.
So you've got just a few moments of calm to sort of fortify yourselves before everything goes crazy.
Right.
Now, the Kloster Neustift is a very special and unique place since its foundation in 1142 as an Augustinian monastery. The vocation of grape growing and winemaking has been at the heart of monastic life. Can you tell us a little bit about this very special place?
Yes, the special thing about our winery is, or the monastery, is that we are not just an active winery for almost 880 years, but we are still being an active monastery as well. And so that therefore there is between the winery, the winemaking process, all that stuff, we have also a lot of culture, but even religion always speaks a role, or has a role. We still have 19 monks here, which are living here in the monastery, and therefore it's a very nice combination of everything, and therefore a very special place.
I guess wine has always been, certainly historically, the monasteries have been essential to preserving winemaking through the Dark Ages and then in later times too. With Kloster Neustift, the foundation of the monastery was linked to wealthy benefactors leaving the monastery tracts of land, and these are still some of your finest vineyards that are still in production today. Is that correct?
That's right. Even it's just a small portion. So we actually do own 7 hectares, so more or less 15 acres, or a little bit more, in the surrounding of the abbey itself, which we did own already a couple of 100 years ago, or which always has been property of the monastery, because you have to imagine that when in the time of the secularization, which was at the beginning of the 19th century with Napoleon, he took away from the monasteries or from the church all their properties and gave it to the farmers, and therefore then the monastery became a lot smaller. And so we have just a little part of the vineyards we already had before, and we were able to maintain until after, and also afterwards. A big part or bigger part of the vineyards were then bought after that period. And so today we, aside of this 7 hectares, we have other around 20 hectares which were bought later.
Okay. And you're still working with a lot of the local farmers who bring their grapes to the Neustift wineries.
Right. So in general here in Alto Adige, cooperatives are quite important. So 70% of the whole production in Alto Adige is produced by cooperatives. And also here in our area, the farmers, it was 60 farmers, decided to found a cooperative. It was in 1961. And in difference to the other cooperatives or the other farmers in other areas of Alto Adige, they decided to not build a winery, but to sell the grapes to a winery. And therefore, in 1962, the abbot, or the former abbot, or the abbot at the time, went to the president of this cooperative and asked them if they would be interested in selling the grape to Abbazia di Novacella. And therefore, it's now 59 years ago, started this collaboration with the local farmers, so with most of the farmers here in the surroundings of Novacella and the abbey or the winery of the abbey. And therefore, we don't have or don't produce wines just out of the 26 hectares we do own, but we have other 60 hectares vineyards which where the grapes are delivered to the monastery and where we do produce the wine out of it.
Okay, that's a fascinating relationship.
Yeah, it's good, and it's a big advantage for both sides because on the market side we can act as a private company, but on the other hand, on the production side, we have this cooperative, which is quite a good model for this side, let's say.
Sure. Sure. Now, the Abbazia di Novacella today produces a large range of white as well as red table wines. The estate is probably best known for your outstanding whites from aromatic and semi-aromatic grape varieties. We're in the most northerly of all of Italy's wine growing areas. What are the conditions, the terrain, the microclimate that make Isaactal, the Isarco Valley, so well suited to the production of these high-quality white wines?
Yeah, Valle Isarco, in fact, is quite special here in Alto Adige because, first of all, it's the northernmost area. So if you're here and you maybe have visited or have the opportunity to visit our winery, you see that with our winery or a few miles further north, wine growing or the vineyards are finishing because it's getting too cold. So we are really on the edge of viticulture. So it's still being possible, but it's not easy. And it has to do with a cool climate. So we are in the north, but we are quite high as well. So the lowest vineyards we have are at 630 meters, which is 2,000 feet of altitude, and we are going up to 850 meters or 2,800 feet. And so we are north, we are quite high. And the third factor with why we have the special grape varieties and why we have these special conditions is the wind systems here in Alto Adige. So in Alto Adige, we have a strong impact of the aura, which is a warm system coming from the Mediterranean. And this has a big impact on Alto Adige. It brings warm air to Alto Adige. But as the Valle Isarco is quite a small valley in the area of Bolzano, this wind system can't enter that well in our valley. And therefore, the impact of these winds is lower. And therefore, we have a temperature difference between, say, Brixen and other important wine growing areas, let's say Appiano, for example, of 2 degrees Celsius or 4 degrees Fahrenheit. And there's a big impact on this. On the other hand, the soils we have are quite similar in whole Alto Adige, or even very different because we have all morenical deposits. As Alto Adige during the different glacial times was always covered by big glaciers. And so we have these morenical deposits which are composed of a lot of various components, and therefore we have kind of the same soils here, which is morenical deposits, but the morenical deposits in general are very, 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 very different by itself as the components are different. They are always very light soils and therefore very suited for wine growing as well.
Okay, so it's that mix of the terrain, the particular climate of this warm air sweeping up to hit the mountain, and of course the altitude of the vineyards that give such aromas to the wines. I know the Propositus range is a very special range linked to the history of the monastery. Can you tell us a little bit about this range of wines?
Yes, the Propositus range was introduced at the end of the 20th century, so in the late 90s. And the idea was to create a special wine which is dedicated to the abbots of the monastery, because Propositus is the Latin word for abbot. And so these wines are dedicated to the abbots, 58 abbots from the founding of the monastery until now. So of the abbots of the last 879 years. And the idea was to create a very special wine from the best spots we have. And therefore, we define the best areas with the best expositions. And then with the oldest wines there, we reduced the yields a lot, so lower yields. And in the cellar, we used different treatments, maybe longer aging on a fine lees or more wood aging. And so was born this special wine product line, which is always, he had a higher quality line, very special wines. And then we started in the 90s, and step by step, we added the different grape varieties. So we started with Lagrein, Pinot Nero, then Kerner, then Sylvaner. And today we have most of our wines in both quality lines. So we call that the basic line. For us, it's the classic line. And then the Propositus line, which is the special product line with a higher quality wines.
Okay, so when people see a bottle of Propositus, they know that's the sort of the top quality, the cru wines of the Abbazia di Novacella. Kerner, you mentioned, is an interesting grape. It's one we're less familiar with. I recall drinking a Propositus Kerner when I was last in Südtirol in February 2020, just before the world changed, and I absolutely loved it. Can you tell us some of its characteristics and why it's able to express itself so fully in Isarco, in the valley?
Kerner is quite a modern grape variety. So it was a new German grape variety created in 1929. And the idea behind was to create a variety which is resistant to the frost and brings high yield. So which would be very suited for areas like ours, which have cold winters, and to the suited or ideal for that time, because then in the 1920s they wanted to produce a lot high yields and a lot of wine out of every hectare. And therefore they took Riesling, German Riesling, and Schiava and did that cross. And the result was quite unexpected. So it was a very aromatic wine with good fruit, even spicy, and a good freshness. The problem of the Kerner at that time, or in Germany, was that if it was brought to high yields, it was quite a flat wine. And therefore in Germany, Kerner never had a big success. Then in the 1960s, the Kerner came to Valle Isarco. And until the late 80s or the beginning of the 80s, we had often problems with winter frost. The farmers pushed a lot on Kerner because Kerner had less problems with winter frost. And so in the 70s, 80s, and then 90s, slowly the vineyard areas increased. And we as a winery then in 1992 started to produce wine out of this grape variety. And on the market side, it was quite a big success because, as I said, it's a very fruity wine, so intense in the nose, and then on the palate it has a spicy and fresh character. And people was enjoying that. And so during the last 20, 25 years, or in the meantime, even 30 years, Kerner became the most important grape variety in terms of quantity.
Right. It's a wine I loved when I last tasted it. Can we turn our attention now a little bit more towards food? The strategic location of Abbazia di Novacella, close to Neustift, the bottom of the Brenner Pass, has made it a notable tappa for literally centuries. Pilgrims en route to Rome pausing here for hospitality. Today, I guess, you have wine pilgrims, tourists from Northern Europe, pausing to taste wine, to buy. The place they all head to is the Stiftkeller, or the Abbey Tap Room. Is it such an atmospheric and historic place to do so? Tell us about the Stiftkeller and maybe some of the local foods that can be sampled with your wines and which wines pair best with them?
Yeah, actually, we don't have just wine tourists here at Abbazia di Novacella because we have a quite an important museum as well and a convention center, and therefore there are lots of people coming to us, which are not just trying want to taste the wine, but also to see the monastery itself because it's quite interesting and it's worth visiting it. In the Stiftskeller, we are focusing a lot on local products. So we offer mostly just cold food, so not warm plates, but pointing on the local products such as speck or local cheeses. Or a specialty we have here is the smoked sausages we produce here in Alto Adige, special bread like the Schüttelbrot, and that's what the Schüttelbrot is a special bread from Alto Adige, so is a dried bread, and the name Schüttelbrot comes from the shaking process, which is done during the production of the bread, and doing this shaking process, the bread gets quite flat, so it's a thin, flat, round bread, which is hard. Yeah, it's very typical for our area.
So perfect with a glass of wine.
Perfect with a glass of wine or with some speck.
Now, the foods of Alto Adige Südtirol are completely different to any other region in Italy. Can you just give us one or two of the classic, not to be missed dishes to try when anyone is visiting the region, and perhaps the wines that best pair with them?
Yeah, we have the big advantage to have an impact of the German and Italian cuisine, and therefore have a very traditional dishes which are, on the other hand, have this lightness of the Italian cuisine. And if you would mention some traditional foods from this area, you have, of course, to try Schlutzkrapfen, which are ravioli filled with spinach. On the other hand, we have dumplings, of course, very typical for Alto Adige, with spinach or just with speck or with anything. So that's quite important. And for our area, very typical product is a wine soup as well, which we are making.
That's made with Silvaner, is it?
That's normally made with Silvaner in our area, as Silvaner is the most typical wine for this area.
And also more heartier game to go with the red wines of the region.
Right.
Werner, is there a particular restaurant perhaps you could recommend near or around Bressanone, Brixen, where our listeners could experience the true authentic foods of the region?
Yeah, there's a very good restaurant I could suggest in Brixen, which is the Finsterwirt, or in Italian Ostescuro, which is traditional. It's not starved, but the restaurant not always has to be starved, but it's very good, very high quality traditional cuisine.
Oh, that sounds perfect. And they could encounter the wines of the Abbazia there.
Right, of course.
I hope that people who are passing in and out of Italy or making a journey to Südtirol will make an effort to find the Abbazia di Novacella. I've been on a couple of occasions myself, and I think it's a very special place that's unique in the history of Italian wine. So I'm really glad we've had a chance to have this chat today, and I thank you for joining us here on Italian Wine Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye for now. We hope you enjoyed today's episode of Wine, Food and Travel with me, Marc Millon, on Italian Wine Podcast. Please remember to like, share and subscribe right here or wherever you get your pods. Likewise, you can visit us at italianwinepodcast.com. Until next time, chin chin.
Hi everybody! Italian Wine Podcast celebrates its 4th anniversary this year, and we all love the great content they put out every day. Chin Chin with Italian wine people has become a big part of our day, and the team in Verona needs to feel our love. Producing the show is not easy, folks. Herding all those hosts, getting the interviews, dropping the clubhouse recordings, not to mention editing all the material. Let's give them a tangible fan hug with a contribution to all their costs. Head to ItalianWinePodcast.com and click donate to show your love.